All right, welcome everybody to this episode 59 of the Navigating Now virtual roundtable series, brought to you by Thoughteum. We go live every week, Thursday afternoon at 3 p.m. Central. Thoughteum is made of a community of leaders, of friends, of family, of clients, and we're thrilled to bring a handful of those to you all, our extended community, on a week-to-week basis. This week, we are going to bring a fascinating leader to the table that we've been looking forward to having here at the Roundtable for a couple of weeks now. Seneca Giese is joining us today to talk a little bit about atypical career paths. You know, we have a lot of leaders that join the Navigating Now community that have just really kind of traveled their own path from a career perspective, and we're so interested as to those decision points, those criteria, even some of those setbacks that become slingshots for them in their career. And Seneca is going to be sharing a little bit about his career path, and we're going to be going a little bit more into learning and development and the role that learning and development has played in his, kind of atypical but very successful career today. So Seneca, welcome to the table.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, so just a couple of housekeeping items as we get into it. We want to welcome everybody to the Roundtable, particularly those folks who are joining us on social media. Again, we stream live to LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook each week. We want to particularly welcome our LinkedIn community. We get so many people that see us in the feed, that stop by. We saw a host of folks last week at our 5-year anniversary that said that they tune in every week, or they stop by on LinkedIn. And we want to thank our LinkedIn community for being a big part of this platform. Throughout, feel free to ask questions. You can either use the chat box if you've registered, and I'll try to take a look at comments in LinkedIn. Otherwise, we've got a few questions for Seneca towards the end. All right, Seneca, welcome to the Roundtable.
Thanks, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so we know that you hold a business development leadership role at Cirrus Aircraft, and we're going to get into your role, but I want to almost take you back. We love to take all of our guests back at the very beginning of our show, because we believe that leaders are people with stories, and we all have our own story. We all have our own path. Where did yours start? And we like to ask this question: what is maybe one of the earliest childhood memories that you have that you could attribute to what you do today?
That's a good question. I think when I was 16 in high school and I had my first car, it was a Honda Civic, I was really fascinated with the tuner culture, if you will. Think Fast and the Furious, but before the movie came out. So my first car was a Honda Civic, and I spent a lot of time and money customizing it. And I was so passionate about the project, I said, I want to find other people that share this common theme, that want to do the same thing to their car. And so I decided to start a car club. And so
Car club.
Cool. It was called Extreme Imports.
That's great.
And I would flag people down on the street as I saw them driving by me, honking the horn, hey, pull over, introduce myself and say, hey, I'm starting a car club. You have a car that's so cool, that meets the criteria to be in the club. Do you want to be in it?
This was back in the day when you could,
do that,
logically flag down a car for no reason and ask them to join a car club.
And so this is 1997, 1998. And I ended up building about a 40-person car club.
Wow.
The early members were sort of the ones that were flagged down, but then word spread.
Yeah.
This club was building, and even the local newspaper did a story on us, because this drive-in that was mainly domestic hot rods all of a sudden started having all these Hondas and imports taking over. And so it was like, what's going on here? This is interesting. So I think just personally, when I'm into something, I want to share that passion with other people.
Yeah.
So I think that's really led me to where I am today.
That is so cool. I think back to, childhood in the 90s as well. I grew up in the 90s, and there were certain community channels that I was able to tap into as a child that unfortunately we're not able to tap into today.
Yeah.
Like special interest clubs and groups that didn't exist on a social media platform. They existed in your cul-de-sac or your block. And so I think you raise a really interesting point. I mean, what it seems to be to me is that you found a sense of community, or maybe your earliest example of building community was in building this car club.
100%.
And was there something about it in at that moment where you said, I've got a skill for organizing people or ideas, or was it just you were just tapping into that as a passion, and as a child you maybe hadn't developed the self-awareness to understand, like, ooh, there's something here?
I didn't have the self-awareness yet at that time, but as I grew older, I think I started realizing a lot of the things I do, I'm sharing with a lot of my friends, and they sort of follow. And so that's where it started to become apparent that I have this knack for persuading others to follow me.
Yeah, it's interesting when you get to the age where you start to really tie everything that you do, your strengths, your weaknesses, to some part of your past. And there are things that I do in building the business, or even the way that I interact day to day with our team, that I can absolutely attribute to the way that I existed as a childhood, amongst my siblings, amongst my friends, etc. One of the things that I used to do as a child that is conducive to kind of what we do today, very similar to you, I was very fascinated with audio technology. And I would go to garage sales and I would pick up like old receivers and stereo speakers. And I would try to outfit my friends' bedrooms with these makeshift kind of AV systems, or stereo systems, if you will. And in a large part, that was me creating an experience, a specific experience for my friends. And that's what we do here at Thoughteum, almost on a daily basis. And so I call on that desire to create experiences for people all the way back to my childhood, when I didn't even know what I was doing at the time.
But why did you want to do that? What was the driving force behind wanting to do that?
Yeah, I love that question. I think it was because there was certain unlocks that I saw in my friends when you could create the space for a great experience, whether that was in, outfitting their bedroom with AV, or a really good football game in the backyard. I had the ability to create that experience for folks in a way that when people walked away, you just knew, you saw it in their eyes, that they appreciated that flag football game, or they loved the fact that you reimagined their space in their house. Yeah, it's super cool. Super cool. Thanks for sharing. Okay, so today we're going to really focus on a couple of key topics, but I want to start more so with your career path, because one of the topics today is atypical career paths. And I think as we're learning more and more about the workplace of the future, we're realizing that folks are bringing such diversity to the way that they are crafting and shaping their own professional experience. I love to sit down with leaders like yourself who maybe found an early sense of that diversity in your career path, and weren't necessarily forced to find that variety. More so, you kind of took control of your career path. So tell us a little bit about your career path, and maybe along the way, what were a few of those big inflection points where you went left when everybody was going right? And then we can dive in.
Sure. So we'll start at the beginning. Graduated high school, got accepted to go to Northern Illinois University, did a semester there, but I was 17 and I feel possibly immature, being, out of the house now, at university. And I came home and, the first semester didn't do too well. It was sort of like maybe a fish out of water. First time living away from home and, being around people, very social, extroverted person. So my dad's like, why don't we, revisit school later when you get a job and start working, and, we'll look at going to school a little bit later. So I was living with my dad at the time, parents were split. So I got a job in sales at a tire shop, discount tire company, and really cut my teeth in sales at that company, and eventually pivoted to automotive sales instead of automotive service. And I think, I realized that I could make as much money in sales as I could, people that come out of school, 5, 10 years later, still, trying to make their way up the career path. So I decided and sort of chose that sales is, for me. I was a salesperson. But then I decided I wanted to get out of automotive sales and go into something like technology. I was super interested in Apple at the time, and as Apple was coming out with iPhone and iPod, and that was really making Apple a much bigger company. But a friend put a bug in my ear and he said, "You should look at Tesla. Tesla is opening in Chicago. This company fits you like a glove. You're a car guy. You love technology." It just married those two together. And so I made a phone call to the Tesla location over here on West Grand Avenue, in the really non-traditional interview process, but went there the next day for an interview, got hired on the spot, and the rest is history, I guess. I spent a better part of 8.5 years at Tesla building the company. One of the first employees in sales and marketing in the field. And yeah, it was really transformative and galvanizing experience.
Yes. So your road to Tesla did not include a 4-year degree or a master's degree. Tell us about that decision for you and how that decision to kind of expedite your going into the business world impacted even just your psyche or your mentality. Was there a point where you were maybe a little self-conscious about it? Did you feel like you needed to land a big name like Tesla in order to kind of validate your educational background? Like, what were some of the things that you thought about as you transitioned from education into the workplace?
Yeah, I when I was at the traditional automotive dealership selling cars, thought I would love to go and sell higher end cars like Porsche or Ferrari. And there were some connections to potentially go do that. But I suddenly became obsessed with the thought of being a part of a company, and also the challenge that is brand new and is super forward thinking with respect to electric versus gas, and sort of being at the ground level. And so I went into that sort of eyes wide open, not knowing what was going to happen. It was really taking the risk, as you have titled this, that it could fail, but it was, the reward was potentially worth it. And it ended up working out. Yeah.
And as you look back and you think about the role that education has played, in your life, how do you think that has even evolved now, 10, 15 years later, as you look at higher education, you look at folks that are potentially coming and interviewing for roles that you have. What type of a focus or an emphasis do you have on higher education today?
Me personally, I still, sort of operate as a very curious person. I have an open mind or beginner's mindset. I try not to, claim to be an expert at anything, because companies come and disrupt experts all the time. So I've learned that no matter how smart you are, how long you've been doing something, somebody always thinks of a different way, and can crush your dreams. So I try to always look for trends that are happening in any industry. In particular, automotive. Obviously, electric's the big buzzword right now. With aviation, it's electric is creeping in, along with sort of vertical takeoff and landing. These companies are popping up to have like this almost like Uber of the sky, if you will. So I've always kind of back up a little bit. Think about the time we grew up. I remember getting the AOL CD in 1994 and the advent of the internet, and always waiting for the you've got mail. But that was a transformative part of my life as well. Like having access to information at your fingertips, just being able to log on and learn about something without having to pay for it. It was amazing, and I think that has been an incredible, I guess, what would you call it, asset, the information superhighway, as they, used to call it, the old timers.
Yeah. It's, you bring up a point around, let's call it our generation, because again, growing up in the 90s, we were maybe the first generation that had the autonomy to create something with a computer. I shouldn't say that, because in the 80s we were creating images and word processing, things of that nature, but we were the first generation to be able to create something autonomously on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 90s that was conversation through what they called the World Wide Web and AOL, which was the first essentially way that we could connect from afar. But I also remember GeoCities being one of the first web page platforms. And in the 90s, I remember I had the ability to create a website, and I don't even remember the topic. It was probably one of my hobbies at the time. You look back at previous generations, and there was their version of GeoCities, but it maybe wasn't as expansive and open and just full of opportunity that the web was at the beginning of our generation. And you would argue that might be the beginning of a complete almost pivot in the way that we educate ourselves. So for me, building that GeoCities website, there was something that switched in my brain that said, I have access to the tools that I need to be able to create, and it doesn't require a degree. It doesn't require a certification or some sort of specialty. And even at the time, I was starting to create behaviors of autonomous creativity and self-paced learning, back before it was even a thing. And you can imagine how that was, yes, one would argue just 25 years ago, but at the same time, with the advancements of technology, 25 years of technology is incredible. And yet at the same time, we now can literally create web pages in seconds. We have bots that can create web pages. We can create the same web pages on a cell phone that it would take weeks to do on a laptop. But yet we still have 4-year institutions that are brick and mortar in rural America that cost $100 to $125K to attend. And that is fascinating to me. And it's not at all a referendum on higher education. I think there's a real place for it, but the format, the methodology hasn't changed much in a world where we could literally learn anything we want at our fingertips.
Well, I think COVID forced a sort of reflection of those institutions to really prove the value, right? Just similar to worker productivity, not necessarily declining from working at home over the last 12 months. Those educational institutions had to sort of prove the value of charging as much for remote learning.
They sure as heck tried not to prove the value. I mean, I know a lot of institutions, almost all but forced students back to campus and quarantined in the dorms. And I know that might have been out of a lack of information or continuity planning, but I still think we've yet to see the biggest impact on higher education. And I think we will over the course of the next couple of years, because everybody's taste and behaviors have changed. For 2 years now, we all have been learning from home. And I think that will translate into, younger learners' taste, appetite for formal education. I still think there's a huge place for it. I went back and got an advanced degree, and simply physically being back in the classroom was the highest value that I could get from that. And I loved it. I just loved physically being with other peers, younger, older, really challenging me. I still think there's a place for that, but I think there needs to be some reimagining in terms of the variety that we offer folks. At Thought Team, we do a lot in the adult learning space. And one of the topics that we're so fascinated about is, how we can close the gap between the way that we learn in organizations and the way that we learn personally, right? So, we as individuals, if we have a hobby or a task to complete or something that we're just super excited about, we immediately roll our sleeves up and we dive into endless information about a topic. But yet in our corporate roles, we oftentimes are limited to, or potentially even our mind is just set to wait for a standard set of curriculum that's either an onboarding program or continuous training that is developed, approved, sent down from the powers that be. And by the time it gets in your lap, you either are behind in your ability to ramp in your role, or it's outdated information. And so we're obsessed with closing that gap between the way that we learn as individuals and the way that we learn as adults. And there's a lot of ways that we can do that. And I'm just curious, how do you learn today, both in and outside of your role? And are those two things different?
I think I've learned so much, again, just always being curious, looking for resources online, in the business sense, so non-traditional learning, right? So what does that mean? Learning through experiences, learning through others, and, learning through what resources are out there. So let me just give you like a personal example. One of my cars that I bought and had fun with has a really complicated braking system. And I chose to, instead of taking it into the repair shop, look online for other people that have done the same brake job, buy the tools and do it myself, just because not only did I want to have the satisfaction of doing it myself, but also sort of the challenge associated with it. And so the fact that the information existed out there and allowed me to learn how to do that and do it safely was amazing. Like others, mechanics, go to these trade schools and pay a lot of money to do it professionally, but I just was able to do it myself by looking online in the right places. So part of that is also being part of a community of folks with the same kind of car and knowing who to ask. And I think community drives a lot of education as well. On the business side, it's again, just through experiences, right? So Tesla, I think, condensed a lot of business learnings into extreme package, right? So startup, pre-IPO, learned how to operate in a blackout period, and then post-IPO, then growing the business from 2,500 cars to 25,000 cars a year. And then the third car was the SUV, and then the fourth car, the Model 3. So just this like extreme hockey stick growth. You have to like transform yourself all the time. And a lot of it was learning sort of on the job. Tesla did not have the abilities to really train people. It was sink or swim. It was let's hire intelligent, bright minds, and they need to do the work and get us to this point.
Yeah.
So it was really a transformative experience at Tesla.
I want to dive into your experience at Tesla, and then you clearly then made a shift from automotive to the skies, right? From the roads to the skies, and I want to talk a little bit about that transition. I like your example though of how you learn personally and how that's so potentially different than the sink or swim mentality that you had at Tesla. One of the things that I'm fascinated about in adult learning is the fact that there are technologies that are advancing so quickly right now that will impact the way that we work. They're developing quicker than the pace that we could actually develop training on them.
Right. The training becomes outdated
before it even lands. And a perfect example of this is the NFT space currently. Non-fungible tokens. This is all part of kind of the crypto craze. And I've got to laugh because when I scroll through Instagram today, of course, because I've been learning more about NFTs, I will get paid advertisements for a 6-month course on NFT technology and cryptocurrency, and I have to laugh. I said, like, how did some organization think that they could put together a 6-month course and it be relevant and timely and impactful on something that is moving as quickly as NFTs? NFTs are a technology that could drastically change the face of the way that we interact, the way that we build community, and I would argue it could change the face of the way that we do business. But it's so rapidly developing that the only true way to be learning it is to actually be in it, to be in the Discord communities, to be, trying and purchasing some of these NFTs and selling them. It's so early on, and it's so rapidly evolving. And that might be one of the first significant examples of a technology that is developing quicker than we can actually train people on it. And as much as of people might think that NFTs are just kind of like a fun hobby, that's going to start happening and will, and probably already is, in the workplace. And Tesla is a perfect example of a company that might be developing technologies quicker than it can actually train their employees. Therefore, you all having a bit of that sink or swim mentality. Is that one hypothesis in terms of the learning experience?
I mean, I was in sales and marketing, not so much engineering and product development, but I think that might be the case on those two sides, engineering and PD. But it's still with sales and marketing, we had to think of new ways to try to sell somebody a technology or a car that didn't exist yet. So, here, buy this car. It doesn't exist. We're going to build it, in a year's time or a year and a half. And we were selling the vision more than we were the product.
What are one or two things that people may think about Tesla? I mean, when I think Tesla, I think complete state of the art. I think future forward. I think rocket ships going into the sky. I mean, I just think of all of this cool technology. Are there misconceptions about Tesla and the development of the technology and who's behind it? Because I think a lot of us just think Elon kind of like ideating, and then he's got a team of people that just put it into action. But tell us a little bit more about like Tesla and what it was like working there.
There was this sole vision of making transportation sustainable, like moving to sustainable energy. Electricity is available by the sun. It's a fusion generator in the sky. So if you can collect that energy, put it into a car and drive around, that is 100% carbon neutral, or zero carbon. So that's an incredible concept. And we're now, I guess, to quote Elon, we're having this crazy experiment of burning fossil fuels and putting as much CO2 into the atmosphere and just kind of waiting to see what happens. That's a crazy experiment. So I think the mission everybody sort of rallied around was very that was our true north, right? And so perception wise, like Tesla is not out to harm the environment, or it was all for the greater good of humanity. There may be some I really can't think of any other like negative perceptions of Tesla.
Well, I think that's what's done so well for its brand is like, I mean, it really does feel like Tesla's remit is starting with some of these like big, highly ambitious, but absolutely necessary questions. And those questions are at an altitude that is significantly higher than maybe what we see other companies building business models off of, right? You might think of a larger, car manufacturer starting with the question, how can we safely and effectively sell as many cars as possible? And you look at a company like Tesla, and they more so start with, how can we, sustain and live on this planet longer than we expected, or potentially other planets. And it's interesting. I mean, a whole nother conversation, but that brand identity, I feel like has it's potentially added to the brand value, particularly the last few years when people even with the most short-sighted minds, have had to start to think longer term or even more existentially with the pandemic. More people are focusing. I mean, the thought of of it being necessary for us to get in a rocket and live on another planet today feels way more realistic and potentially necessary to me than it did 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if that's, something that, Elon and the Tesla company thought about prior to.
Tesla buys us time. SpaceX gets us off the planet.
Yeah.
So, but no, as you're saying that, I thought of one, which is, Tesla started with the car, obviously, in moving transportation to become sustainable. And then later they introduced the software for autopilot and eventually full self-driving to make driving safer. So, therein lies two sort of missions, right? Like get off of carbon and fossil fuels, and two, make driving as safe as it can be.
Yeah.
And there's some perceptions of autopilot and or full self-driving not being safe because it's sort of in beta stage. But the technology's there.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Okay, so I want to fast forward. Today, you're in business development for a fascinating organization by the name of Cirrus Aircraft. Tell us a little bit about what got you from Tesla to Cirrus, because I understand there were some big decisions that you made, particularly in the wake of the pandemic and things of that nature, that landed you where you're at today. So you went from the roads to the sky, and tell us a little bit about that transition.
Yeah, sure. So in between Tesla and Cirrus was a startup that I did called Current Automotive. I was a co-founder there. And part of that was the genesis of that was from my last role at Tesla, which was in used cars and certified pre-owned. And so did that for about 2 years, and it was really fun, loved building brands. But there was a point in time during the shutdown, as we call it, last year, March, right? Sometime around then. Just really reflecting internally and not sort of knowing what to expect with COVID, right? Like, okay, everybody's sheltering in place. What's next? And obviously seeing the news of people dying and getting sick, and like, oh man, that could potentially be me. So I thought, all right, what's one thing that I want to do? If my time was to potentially be up here in the next year or two, and I said, that's learn how to fly and become a pilot. Cool. So I started flight lessons. I found a flight school that was cool with masks in the plane, and started flight lessons. Had always been sort of an aviation nerd. Buying the plane magazines, learning the makes and models and power and all that. But started flight lessons and absolutely hooked. And after getting about halfway through to my private pilot license, contacted Cirrus and had a connection there. Went through the interview process. They were looking for somebody to fill in this business development role to kind of bring an outsider's perspective to aviation and to help them grow, beyond their existing business now. And I started about a year ago, September of 2020. And I'm absolutely having a blast. And I finally achieved my private pilot license April of this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, just one of a million examples of, how the last 2 years have had such an impact on us all taking charge of our career, if you will. What were some of the lessons that you learned in starting a company?
Yeah. So it was the second one that I helped start. First one being a record label, even before Tesla, in my DJ days and music days. But it's hard. There's a lot to consider, right? Especially when you start employing people, right? Yeah. You're responsible for their well-being and making sure the company does well so that they can have a job and provide for themselves and their families. And so, no, I think I'm a creator. I love building. I love sort of branding and marketing. I'm very passionate about those things. But I don't know if that necessarily was with me, in the beginning, right? Like outside of not finishing college. I think I developed sort of the passion for those things in this career trajectory that I've had.
Mm-hmm. And maybe what lessons did you take from, being a startup founder multiple times over to joining an organization and heading up business development?
Treating my current role at Cirrus like we're starting a new business.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to tap into people that aren't familiar with this world, with this community, and sort of trying to bring them in. Like, here, let me show you what personal aviation is like. Letting them know that it exists. And so marketing and getting the message out is a big part of that.
Yeah. Tell us about like what's the most exciting aspect of your role? Like, what are some of the cool things that you're doing today?
I get to fly the planes all the time.
Yeah.
So that's probably the coolest part of the job. Meeting incredible entrepreneurs who are customers and learning their stories as well. Our primary customer is an entrepreneur and business owner as well. We don't sell to too many businesses. It's mostly individuals that are pilots and use this aircraft as a tool to further their business. But aside from that, we're working on some digital technology so that you can connect to the plane from your phone, get details, and be able to say check on your fuel before you take off and go to the airport. And you can call and have them top it off before you even show up. Right now, you have to do that when you get there.
Yeah.
So
we were talking a little bit about this before we went live today. And I just think it's such a fascinating conversation. So I almost want to bring it up again for our audience. What are you more fascinated with? I think you know the answer to this, but I want you to elaborate. Why are you more fascinated with air travel than you are ground travel?
All you need to do is take a flight and be in control of that flight to a destination that, say, gets you there in an hour by flying.
Yep.
That maybe gets you there 5 hours by driving. Personal aviation and owning or having access to an airplane is time travel.
Yeah.
It's incredible. When you soar over the traffic and you look down and you say, wow, that could be me, but no, I'm up here right now.
Yeah.
It's the best feeling in the world.
And why is there not more consumer or private air travel today?
I think a lot of people assume aviation is just unattainable, and whether that means actually owning an airplane or becoming a pilot to control that airplane. It's definitely attainable. There are ways to own an aircraft or become a pilot and rent planes to travel where you want to go. It's just I can't talk enough about it, and that's why I'm so passionate about my current role at Cirrus.
Let's talk a little bit about business development, because we're a community full of sales leaders. We have a lot of BDRs that tune in as well too. Where do you see your strengths in business development? Where do you see opportunities in the art of business development, and where do you see it going moving forward?
I'm thinking about this in terms of my perspective to aviation. And so you're saying strengths and opportunities. So my strengths are being well-versed about aviation, coming in from the outside, sort of having general knowledge, but also having sort of that fresh perspective, and having experience building, Tesla and a rapid growth technology company. There's a lot of innovation coming down the pipe in aviation as well, and a lot of incumbent entrenched companies in aviation may not be equipped to handle that rapid pace of innovation. And so it's sort of bringing experience and those perspectives along with opportunities. Is maybe not knowing the entire aviation landscape, only being a year in. So there's a lot more to learn personally about the aviation business and how it all works. Although I'm a pretty quick study, and I'm always, again, beginner's mindset, never an expert.
Yeah. If you had to choose one or the other, what would you choose? If you had one thing to add to your bag, and that was technical prowess or technical knowledge in a business development discussion, or deep relationships, what would that be?
I'm a relationship person.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could build a team of technical minds and be strong in that regard. But I feel like I'm the relationship person, and I can go out and seek people to build that team.
Yeah, we definitely agree as well too. In building a client services organization, as you get larger, you start to consider new tools, new technology, even new methodologies of how to grow your business, how to improve top line, et cetera. And yet we are so surprised year over year, quarter over quarter. It comes down to those relationships, and those relationships are made of like connection and like really good discussions. And for us, that's helping our clients see a little bit of the future. I can imagine that's the case for you as well too. And not selling off of a spec or some sort of like shelf of offerings. No matter how many tools we put at it, no matter how fancy our business development approach might get, no matter how much paid advertising we ultimately might get into or social media, it all comes down to the relationships. And I hope that never changes. Yeah.
100%.
Same way that you were building relationships in your car club back in 1997.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay, before we wrap up, Seneca, we've got a quick lightning round for you. So I'll just go through a couple questions and answer them. First thing that comes off the top of your mind. What are you geeking out about today?
Flying. I know it's so cliche, but
that's so great. That's your job. It's awesome.
I can't get enough of it. And as I was on my way over here, I was checking the weather to see if I might go flying today.
Oh, so to clarify, that's you actually flying is what you're geeking out about.
Yes.
That is so
Being
interesting.
A pilot, I'm studying for my instrument rating right now, which will allow me to fly through, light rain, clouds. Right now I can only fly on perfect days.
Yeah, and that will inform the way that you sell your planes and your offerings. Right. I'll go back to I think what Seneca just demonstrated is what we call practitionership, which is your ability to see your work as an art form or a craft. And it's almost like that thinking that you had on the way over here, that was you demonstrating your art form or your craft. Like that was you being obsessive about what it is that you're into and ultimately what you're selling, right?
My wife and friends always make fun of me because, we see the planes from O'Hare landing, and I'm just casually looking up, oh, that plane's coming in from Japan, or that plane's coming in from Dallas. I like to know.
You just know. Yeah. It is such a tool in adult learning, is that ownership and that ability to apply. And I'll give a perfect example. I will go back to the NFT technology as a topic that I would suggest anybody getting into, whether you are in business or you are in the arts or you are in services. This is a topic that it's on the edge, and it really pushes you to think about how it may or may not apply to what you do. And it's so universal. It's about building community. It's about exchange. It's about potentially an entirely new system of collecting assets. And I'm not, pushing NFTs whatsoever. I've actually never bought one myself, but I've learned a ton about them. And it just lights me up because it gets me thinking about, how I might redesign a learning experience, or how I might, approach a conference that we're developing, things of that nature. And so that passion that you have outside of work, which just so happens to be flying, fuels your ability to create and innovate within work. And that's the spirit, the heart of practitionership. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
That was not a lightning round, and that was my fault. Tell us what you are, okay, and I'll have to clarify, outside of aviation related content, what are you consuming today? And it could be a TV show, a movie, a podcast. It doesn't have to do with planes.
Cooking. So I aspire to potentially go into the food industry and become a chef.
Okay,
And
another career change.
I chose not to do that because I wanted my social life and weekends.
Yeah.
And I see how hard the talented folks here on Randolph Street and
Oh my gosh.
Fulton Market pour into their
Hardest
businesses.
workers. Yep.
So kudos to them. But I just came across this YouTube channel, and this guy spends days on these recipes, but there's a theme behind it, and they're just like very, very comforting videos.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, definitely food.
Is there a tie between like cooking and flying? Is there something you're tapping into with the cooking, whether it's like the recipe is the flight manual or like the precision of the ingredients, or maybe it's just escapism from your everyday?
Cooking at home is therapeutic for me. So
Yeah.
Being a pilot, you follow checklists, and sometimes in cooking there's the recipe. But there's you can not follow a recipe and still have a good dish.
Mm-hmm.
You can sort of improvise.
Mm-hmm.
So there may be some. I think just for me personally, it's therapeutic and it's a release. I just kind of put my phone down and I cook the family dinner, and it's all good. All
right. So follow-up question: you have one to choose, the recipe or the chef?
In what context? I'm choosing to cook food based on the chef that created that dish, or
you are you betting on the recipe or the chef? I guess is the question when you go to a restaurant.
The chef.
Yeah.
It's the chef.
Yeah, it's the jockey, not the horse.
Yeah.
We do have some people say the recipe, because they say like a really good recipe can be messed up by a terrible chef.
Yeah, exactly.
But to your point, like the chef is the artist, right? So there's variance to the recipe that makes it great. Awesome. What are you looking forward to the most?
I am looking forward to this new skill that I have, which is to be able to take a device, an airplane, and take my family to new places and have new experiences that has opened up entirely new world. Without this skill and ability, you're stuck in the two-dimensional world.
So what does that look like? I mean, when you think 10 years out, you and your family are doing what?
We're randomly jumping in a plane on a Friday to go to...
Where is the plane?
The airport, Wheeling.
Okay.
And we're going up to Mackinac Island for the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
You could fly in or take the ferry, but you cannot drive there.
I love that. In 10 years, do you think that is, and this is a yes or no answer, in 10 years, is that realistic?
Absolutely.
Okay. In 10 years, do you think there will be even more advancement? Like maybe that's the norm, but like we're starting to get into other stuff like potentially multi-plane hovercrafts and things of that nature.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Whole nother discussion for another time. A discussion that is absolutely near and dear to my heart. Seneca, I could sit and talk to you for another hour, but we so appreciate your time today. We also appreciate your insights. We really love talking to leaders about their career paths and some of those big decisions and some of the small decisions that have made them who they are. So thank you so much for stepping in today.
Thank you.
And welcome to the community. We really appreciate it. Okay, we want to thank everybody for tuning in to this episode of Navigating Now. As mentioned, we go live every Thursday at 3 p.m. Central. Those folks who are joining from LinkedIn, you can find us in your feed every Thursday afternoon. And next Thursday, we have another incredible guest at the table. Matt Horio is going to be joining us for episode 60. And Matt is a managing partner at Finance IQ. This is a fascinating organization that is making finance more accessible and more realistic to everyday investors. He's going to be talking about partnerships, the power of knowing your business. So we are really excited to welcome Matt to the table. You can find all of our episodes on our YouTube channel, or simply just go to www.thoughtium.com/live for a catalog of our previous episodes. Thank you all so much for joining, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great rest of your day. Talk to you soon.